The city of Durham is now considered a Fourth Amendment workplace after a ruling from city council members last week.
The amendment protects people against arbitrary searches and arrests and serves as the basis of search warrants with a probable cause of crime.
Now, the move increases protections for city workers against U.S. immigration raids and arrests, and it comes less than 2 months after 4 ICE agents attempted to detain an undocumented man at the county courthouse.
Joining us this morning to talk about what this means, if there are any expected challenges here, our chief legal analyst, Khalif. Khalif, good morning.
Good morning.
So let's talk about this. ICE activity, enforcement, typically a federal response here, right? Not a state thing. But now we've got the state there. We're looking at the Fourth Amendment workplace here for the city of Durham. Talk about the rights now that the city has over a federal, typically a federal activity.
Absolutely zero. I mean, those are, we're talking about the supremacy clause in terms of over, right? And trumping, if that's the best word. This doesn't trump the federal government, pun intended. The Trump administration could come in tomorrow with a valid warrant, and the city of Durham could do absolutely nothing to stop them from arresting someone. What this does do, and these are more symbolic than anything, we're attempting to, show our support for our citizens. We're attempting to say that they should live and work in places where they can fear being arrested or going to court and fear being, taken by masked individuals. And so we'll show a support. And then what we'll also do is not strengthen, because that's what it appears, but it's not strengthening. It's really reaffirming. It's reaffirming that until you get a warrant, ICE agents, you can't come into these buildings. Typically, the government can't force, I should say the federal government cannot force a state, that's clear case law, or municipality to work with them. Now, the state of North Carolina has decided to force sheriffs to comply with ICE demands and requests. But outside of that, like a local police department, and I looked at the video from the city council meeting, they talked about their Mayor Pro Tem said there will be no instance, 0 instances of the Durham Police Department assisting ICE. So those types of things, reaffirming that we won't help you, we won't assist you. If you want to go get them and you try to come into these workplaces, you better have a warrant or we're going to kick you out, because we're reaffirming what the Fourth Amendment requires.
And kind of reminding everyone of the amendments of our Constitution and what rights are afforded to us. But some might ask, if someone is undocumented, they are in the country illegally, do they still have those same rights that are afforded to American citizens?
The Constitution is clear that if you are here, the probable cause is still allowed, that those amendments, specifically the Fourth Amendment, is still protecting you because you are here in this country. Now, there are a number of rules that are, I should say, amendments that are questioned, and there is back and forth with legal scholars on whether they apply to folks that are here in this country legally or illegally. But the Fourth Amendment is one that has consistently been upheld, that you still will need for them to be able to get someone in a place like that. You need a warrant. That's why you have a number of scenarios where, like that instance a couple months back where the guy ran into his house. Well, ICE couldn't just go in there and kick in the door. Why? Because they needed a warrant to get into this individual house. There's 2 ways a person can come into your home, either by you giving them consent or them getting a warrant. And so lacking both of those, that family, if I'm not mistaken, is still hiding out in their house. There's nothing that could say, you know what, they're not citizens. We believe they're here illegally. We're just going to kick in the door and throw our due process portion of our Constitution out of the window. That is still not happening, because if it is, they would have already went in there and arrested them.
Khalif, you mentioned there's nothing that the federal government can do to force them to comply with that, police stations, et cetera. But we do know the Trump administration will often say, okay, then we'll hit you with not sanctions, but we'll take away funding and things like that. Is there any legal protection if the city says, okay, we're not going to comply, the police department says we're not going to comply, and then they take away funding?
I mean, it would be kind of like the Harvard lawsuit that we just recently talked about last week. If the court, and it would obviously be litigation. And so if it was the first step with Durham making this move, and the Trump administration decided, you know what, we're going to take funding or stop dollars from coming in, then the next step logically would be Durham filing a lawsuit, some type of injunction saying, listen, they've taken our funds and it's been retaliatory. And then you would hope that you would get a judge that would say, hey, point to the causal connection on why you've taken these funds. And if you can't, if it looks like it's clear retaliatory, then they would order those funds to be unheld. That's a clear example of what happened in the Harvard case. And I think something like that in this scenario would also be a straightforward approach. Then, I mean, the next step after that would be the Trump administration appealing to the Court of Appeals. And then you're rolling the dice to see, do I get an appellate court that is open to the argument that the lower court agreed to? And that's multiple steps down the road, but we've seen that play out maybe 10 to 12 times already in this administration.
Could this kind of movement signal something to spread across the country? Can you see other municipalities and cities doing this elsewhere?
I can, but I mean, again, I overemphasize the symbolic nature of these. I mean, while I appreciate and respect folks that are, trying to make sure they stand up for the people within their jurisdictions, their constituents that are voting for them. I'm not talking about the people that don't have rights to vote, but the folks that are still outraged that this is occurring in their communities. They're just supporting those individuals. So that's great, but it's symbolic only. The better approach would be finding ways to work with the administration to ensure that they are not overreaching. And I say that lightly as well as Julian smirks. But I still believe that somewhere in there is compromise to work together. If not, there will always be a greater divide within this country, and it's getting further and further apart. Ironically, I thought the party of states' rights. Everything else gets kicked back to the states with the Republican Party if you're talking about abortion, and the 50s if you're talking about civil rights. But these issues, this is one where the Trump administration is saying states and cities, we want you to do what we're telling you to do, which is different from the argument that they make everywhere else where it's like the federal government, and they've said this, should not be telling states what to do. So it's flipped the argument on its head. And I think in those scenarios, that's where you can bring them back to the table and say, hey, remember what you guys have been saying, and everywhere else, we're asking you to do that here and let us take care of this.
All right, Chief Legal Analyst Khalif, thanks so much.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.